Hello everyone, my name is Kyle Hand. I am the creative director of 4-Course Dungeon. This production video will discuss the development journey of 4-Course, describing thought processes and decisions made along the 8-month-long production. To begin, students were tasked with creating pitches that would make their way tournament style to the final selection of games. 4-Course Dungeon, created by Morgan DeMonk, our future art lead, stormed its way as a fan favorite to the top of the 30-plus games to go head-to-head with Avigor, a demon-slaying RPG. As these final two games were solidified, teams were formed using a drafting approach. Morgan, myself, and our producer Thomas Fletcher spent a few days beforehand coming up with our top picks for who would make 4-Course Dungeon a success. Morgan's vision of many creatures to hunt in a fantasy world meant that we would look to animators and riggers first, then to Unreal Engine programmers, as that was our planned engine for production. From the beginning, we all agreed that we wanted all assets in our game to be made from scratch so that we could truly call our game our own, and by selecting the team that we did, this was possible. The first major task in production was creating our prototype. This had many iterations, but we came to the idea of creating a gauntlet showcasing our different mechanics in a playable space. We decided that the third-person action-adventure path was the best for combat and overall experience of the player. Given that decision, movement and basic look controls were a must, followed by some of our more advanced mechanics. The charge was intended as a full, all-out sprint that would take control of the player's camera to give a trade-off for the extra speed. The rising and falling lava was an environmental hazard that would bounce the player up into the sky, giving them a chance to return to safety. Jumping and dashing were also added to help the player traverse the levels and give them additional combat opportunities. In Prototype, we lacked animation but found other ways to portray the movement. We needed this due to our combo system for combat. Basic roaming AI was also created along with our first iteration of cooking. The early ideas of 4-Course Dungeon involved hunting creatures for ingredients and cooking them while under a time limit. The player would have to fight and explore while also managing their cooking to make dishes that would be judged during the cooking show. There was a speed aspect to this idea. Players would be able to reference a cookbook to read and select recipes they wanted to make. Several cooking stations like the oven and mixing stations were planned to help players combine ingredients to make more advanced dishes. This was a very complex and involved idea that we loved and were excited about. The prototype also included our first iterations of models and artwork. 3 biomes were planned, the first being a geothermal ice cave. This would have lava and crystals in dark caves. The second, a forest biome with trees and vegetation, and the final being a rainbow desert biome with sand dunes and an oasis. Each of these would have different creatures respective to their own biome, and the maps were intended to play differently. Our art showcase was set up like a museum that allowed viewers to walk around and look at our weapons and creatures that were made. This art showcase gave a brilliant glimpse into what 4-Course Dungeon could be in the future. As the sprints progressed, we did everything possible to begin our production on our different biomes. Creating 3 biomes each with their own assets and features was an extensive amount of work. We began with the geothermal ice cave, as this would be the most geometric shaped models and would be the smallest of the 3 biomes. In Sprint 3, we had our first white boxes. These would show off how traversing the rising and falling lava and falling platforms added would go. We wanted to show how lava and ice might mix in a fantasy world and how the general gameplay of 4-Course Dungeon would work. We placed AI in placeholder spots to give direction to the player on where they would go to get their ingredients. Our early iteration of the slime was also programmed. This creature had a unique mechanic of leaving behind a damaging puddle and would split into smaller versions of itself when harmed. We wanted 3 levels of each biome. This would allow us to randomly select a level each time you played, giving more replayability to our game. A player might load in and play Geothermal Level 1, then Forest Level 1, then Desert Level 1, and then the next time through could get Geothermal 2, Forest Level 3, and Desert 1, and so on. We figured that if we could create the assets for each of these biomes, the level creation could expand, because assets could be reused to set just these levels. In Sprint 3, we continued our path to finding Four Course Dungeon's art style with a new shader. This shader would help give the world a cohesive look and enhance the artwork made. Sprint 3 was a big success in production, and we learned a lot about the level layouts and what we would have to do moving forward to better our game. Ideas like slippery ice and modifying our steam geysers came to mind, as well as blending the levels better. We found that having different floors broke some of our gameplay loops, but still liked the idea of ice meeting lava, and we would shift our direction after this sprint. The first semester began wrapping up, and Vertical Slice was rapidly approaching. We had a lot to do, and we felt we were a bit behind with production. With that in mind, we cut the levels down to one and focused on creating one fully set dress level. This level would have all of our newly created AI, such as the Helifish, and finished Deernicorn and Slime. These AI would attack the player properly and drop ingredients like we planned. We were excited to see our gameplay beginning to truly take form. Intro cinematics and dialogue that had been worked on the whole semester, and in Vertical Slice, we were able to show them properly. Four Course Dungeon would use text, cutscenes, and dialogue to tell the story of Paprika and the Four Course Dungeon show. Our personality-filled cast of characters were loved by our audience, and our team felt good about the world we were creating. Vertical Slice also had the animations and final character model for Paprika. In previous sprints, our game lacked life and was difficult to see what the game was going to be, but in this build, we showed the potential of our game. The player was able to experience our full game loop of hunting creatures, collecting ingredients, and cooking them to make a dish. Our cooking in this stage was the least polished, but we were happy to see we could successfully play the game. As mentioned before, we learned even more this sprint. Lighting was rough and our game was not fully optimized, and as a whole, we felt we could do better and were encouraged to revamp the game. After a few team discussions, we decided that we wanted to cut the forest biome and desert biome as a whole. This was a unanimous decision that would allow us to take what we had and polish it further. Since we were cutting the majority of our planned content, we could go back and remake the things we felt needed it. This first semester was a test run of sorts, and our team knew what we needed to do to make our game what it should be. The first steps we made with our rescoped production plan was to handle the art side of things. The shader was reworked along with lighting to make the game more readable. Our Vertical Slice was dark, and we wanted our game to feel bright and fun. Textures were remade for our Deernicorn and Helifish, along with modifying our lava textures. Deernicorn were given a gradient look that helped them stand out from the snow around them, while the Helifish were given more contrast and detail. New particle effects were made to help with player conveyance and the new function of our steam geysers. This included blood splatters for our Deernicorn and VFX for our Helifish attacking the player, along with steam that goes along with our geysers. There are many requests for more UI, so our UI team made health bars that looked like pie charts for our enemies. Not only did this help with giving the player information, but it added to the overall theme of food and cooking. Our art team worked extremely hard overhauling our assets to fit the new aesthetic. New animations and models had also begun production. These were for the Molem, Worm, and Cockatrice. Everything felt more cohesive, and the game felt like it had an identity that it lacked previously. Gameplay was also revisited. The largest changes involved our remade level white boxes. Each of our 3 level designers were given creative freedom to work on their own iteration of a geothermal ice cave. By doing this, the levels all felt different in the way they played, and personality was shown through their designs. The levels were more open and inviting to players. The past lessons learned from old designs were no longer there, and the levels were more organic. Our playtesters gave lots of good feedback from our new level design approach, and our gameplay benefited from it. Our first new level involved a bridge, with an upper level and a lava river. The second had a ramp to an upper level covered in ice, and the third had a beautiful lava fall spreading lava throughout the level. Environmental actors such as slippery ice and modified geysers that launch the player were added, giving these new playgrounds life and interactability with the player. More changes with gameplay involved adding new AI, such as the Molem, which was our level boss. It was meant to be a world of hurt if the player woke it up, and was supposed to give a good reward when killed. Changes to our combat also continued. Status effects for weapons such as bleed, stun, and slow made their way into production, which breathed new life to strategy in hunting the creatures. Hit pause and other additions to code helped give each of the new weapons new weight and feedback when the players were landing good hits. We spent a lot of time with different ways of doing hit detection. Previously, when swiping the knives, damage would only be counted once. We made changes so that the hit detection would count multiple hits as long as the knives were touching the creature. This gave reward to players who were landing good, clean hits from start to finish. We still had a lot of work to do and spent a good amount of time planning for the future of how we were going to tie all up the loose ends and create our game successfully. The last couple of sprints are the most important to production. These are where we made the most progress. Our cooking received a new direction. Previously, the player would hunt and cook in the same round. This was confusing to the player, and we decided to make the game a combat, then cooking format. The player will go into a dungeon to gather ingredients as you would see in a normal cooking show, then return to the kitchen to cook them. With this new change, we needed to modify the cooking to be engaging to the player. With the old cooking, the difficulty was managing time and gathering. We no longer had this, and to make up for the lack of difficulty, we made each cooking station require the player to be completed with a skill-based minigame. Our oven was placing 2 dials at the right temperature, the freezer was a time-based click event, and our mixer was a Simon Says minigame. These minigames would need to be completed as the cooking stations broke down. The goal for the player was to successfully get the cooking station to completion before time ran out. Cooking was our most difficult portion of our game. It needed to be engaging and balanced, while still remaining true to our game concept. The final iteration of cooking was not where we originally planned, but with time running out, this was the best decision for success. Now that we had our cooking sorted, we could finish our UI and level designs. The level designer spent many hours set dressing their levels with rocks and crystals. It was an enormous task to take blank walls and turn them into organic cave walls. VFX were added to all of the levels, giving them snow and cinder dust. There were many playtesters finding little places where the player could get stuck, and lots of iterations of modifying the environment actors such as the steam geysers to get them to play nicely through a round. Our level designers spent lots of time fixing these. Our level designers worked with the code team to place AI in correct places, and with modification to level requirements or quests, they could have different creatures in each of their levels. This allowed us to introduce new creatures as levels progressed from one to the other. The UI team was successful in adding lots of tutorialization and updating the current UI in the game. Things like making the timer tick down when the player dies and waypoints added more depth to gameplay. Tutorials and other player conveyance like level prompts and pop-up dialogue gave the world more life and direction to the player. If players didn't know how to play our game before, they sure did now. Our code team spent a lot of time squashing bugs and programming the last of what makes a game a game. The player was able to progress from start to finish, from level to level, and from quest to quest. They could successfully win and lose respectively. The menus all worked, and our game really became a game in the last few sprints. Over the course of the year, we had lots of little pieces here and there that needed to be connected. This involved inventory, level requirements, and overall health management. Those made it in the end, and our game plays well. AI for the worm, cockatrice, and molem were also finished, along with all the assets for them. Lots of polish for VFX and sound effects all made their progress in the last few sprints. The music and other nice things that make a game enjoyable were there as well. Our world of 4-Course Dungeon came together. All of the art was finally done, bringing new characters like Ginger, Nutmeg, and Jordan Hamsey to our new world. We are pleased with the way that 4-Course Dungeon turned out. We spent a lot of time working hard on our game, with life, school, and work, all combating for our time. With our game releasing on Steam soon, we look forward to seeing how many players enjoy our game. If you haven't already, be sure to wishlist it on Steam, 4-Course Dungeon. We are grateful for all the support we received and hope you all enjoy 4-Course Dungeon.